This happened last night to my mother. She was in my brother's room, putting him to sleep. He's 10. In his room, there's a window on the far wall, from the bed, directly straight in front of the bed. So if you're laying down on the bed, you can see through the window. My mother was laying on her stomach, and my brother was on his back, so he could see through the window, but my mother couldn't. All of a sudden, there was a light on the porch. My mother thought that it was me or my twin sister on the porch, but neither of us were there. We were both downstairs in our basement. My brother's room is upstairs. Then my brother says, "That's weird." So my mum rolls over to look at the window, and there's a shadow up against it. We have plants on our porch, but my mother said that it didn't look like any of them. It looked like the outline of a figure. My mum gets up and leaves his room and asks if we're outside. After learning that we were never outside, she goes to turn off the porch light and sees that it wasn't even on. She unlocks our front door and walks out onto the porch to check out my brother's window, and she sees nothing. She goes back into my brother's room after turning on the porch lights and sees that the shadow is no longer there. There were some strange noises outside at night too, but none of us went outside after my mother told us about what happened. We live in a subdivision, so it's not like we're out in the middle of nowhere, but we have a somewhat long driveway, so it'd be extremely weird and creepy for someone to be on our porch, because our porch is far from the street, let alone there being no reason to be on it at midnight. Also, what makes this story kind of creepy is that I jog around our neighborhood, and the other night I was followed by a car for about 2 blocks. I don't know if they're related, but the whole thing is really suspicious. I don't know what to think. This happened when I was a 10-year-old girl. I had a golden retriever husky mix called Coda, who was around 6 months old, and I loved him. I ran home from school every day, just so that I could play with him before I started my homework. One day, when my mum was driving me to this badminton class, and she says that she forgot to pick up an important package from her boss, and had to stop really quickly, we stopped in our local post office, and she parked in an empty space before running off. I sat in the back row, with Coda. The window was slightly open as my mum didn't want us to suffocate. You could probably fit an arm in there if you really wanted to. So, we're sitting there, and I'm talking with Coda about my friends and whatever a 9-year-old would be talking about, because doesn't everyone at one point start talking to their pets about their life problems? Suddenly, though, I see a hooded man who looked homeless. He was dirty and had unkempt hair, and he knocks on the window and goes like,
"Hey, is your mother here, kid?"
I get kind of nervous and smartly say, "Yeah." He goes,
"Then where is she?"
I get kind of suspicious because Coda starts growling and barking, which he never does. I say, "Well, she's coming back any moment, but probably not right now." There was a small tension for like a second or two, and then he suddenly sticks his arm through the window, and he has a knife, and I launch myself to the other side of the seat while shrieking. He's lunging and stabbing, trying to get in further. A good thing the door was locked. Coda leaps up though, and sinks his teeth into his arm, like he was biting into a chunk of meat. The man loses it, and I can see a hole in his jacket with blood pouring out from it. He quickly recoils his arm back from the gap, but drops his knife as his hand hits the top part of the door. I stop crying for a second and pick up the knife. Then, being a kid, I suddenly remember how Simba from The Lion King was getting attacked by hyenas and he started attempting to threaten them by roaring. Well, I decided that that might not be a bad idea, and I remember a swear word I heard from this 5th grader in my school. In my strongest, booming voice, I yell at this guy to fuck off and point the knife at him, making it seem like I was about to throw it. He quickly runs off and I throw the knife out the window. Mum returns and sees the blood on the door, and I quickly start shooting words out of mouth about what happened. We called the police and tried to describe the suspect, but all I could manage to say was that he looked homeless. Around 2007, I was dating this guy and would spend days at a time at his house, mostly getting stoned and watching movies in the basement. He had told me in passing his house was haunted when we started dating, and I eventually got to hear for myself what he was talking about when he said that it seemed like there were some things playing games with voices and general sound projection. The most common thing would be when we were sitting on one side of the house alone, and it would all of a sudden sound like the television was turned on to the highest volume on the other side of the house. It was always a man and a woman having a loud yet indistinguishable conversation with each other. And when you would walk through the house down the hall toward the noise, by the time you got to the door and touched the door handle to open it, it's Dad's empty room, since he was gone for a week or so at the time, the noises would just stop abruptly. Nobody would be inside, no appliances would be plugged in, and no windows open, just nothing. Then, when you walk back toward the other side of the house, it would be faint, but you'd hear the man and the woman continuing their conversation in the room you were previously sitting in, and that would happen back and forth throughout the house until you left pretty much. That happened to me a handful of times, and it happened to him apparently for years. One time though, we were in the basement laying on the floor, just falling asleep, and at the exact same moment, we both jumped up at the sounds of things in the next room crashing loudly. The basement was a one-bedroom apartment. We were in the living room part of it, and it sounded like pots and pans were toppling onto the kitchen floor. Like lots of them. It was really loud, and it was such an abrupt and intense moment that I almost started crying because of how startled I was. Then the sound stopped, and we both heard this skittering noise that sounded like a bunch of dogs on the kitchen floor. And then a door slammed. It sounded like the bathroom door on the other side of the basement kitchen. He had one dog, a corgi, but it never went down into the basement. I made him get up and open the door, and nothing was amiss. No pots or anything on the floor. Nothing. The bathroom door was closed, but we opened it, and there was nothing inside, or nothing that could have gotten through the painted shut tiny window anyway. The last thing about this same house, I was not here for, but apparently he was down in the basement watching a movie, and he heard the upstairs door leading down the stairs creaking open slowly. Then the steps leading down began to creak even slower, and he assumed that it was his dad trying to scare him, something his dad had done before. So he positioned himself at the door, ready to open it when his dad hit the last step to counter-surprise him. When he did this, the door upstairs shot open at the exact same time, and they both jumped out as if they were trying to scare one another. Apparently, his dad had heard the basement door open, and heard him creeping up the stairs, and neither of them could explain how the other could hear the same noise but projected differently to one another. Strangely enough though, something else happened when I was a kid that had to do with sound projection, and it's made me wonder if maybe it's not the house, but me. So, this happened to me when I was little, probably no more than 6 or 7. My dad had bought a shack in the woods of Pennsylvania to flip. I'm not sure where exactly, but the property was extremely secluded and we didn't have any other neighbours for at least 3 or 4 miles. There was snowfall, and it may have been starting to become a blizzard. I can't really remember that bit, but I was walking up and down our really long driveway, running parallel to the woods, and I heard someone in really thick brush, not far away from me, say, "Psst." It was loud enough to stop me and startle me, and I stared at it for a few seconds, not really sure what to do, I guess. And then I heard it again, in the exact same way. It repeated this a few more times while I stood there, not moving and obviously really freaked out. I remember I felt like I was about to pee myself because I was really terrified, and then it finally added, "Come here," in a really loud whisper, followed by another, "Psst." By that time, I booked it down the driveway, and I could still hear it saying, "Psst, come over here," in the exact same tone, over and over. The way it spoke, it didn't seem natural. And when I think about it now, it sounded almost like a weird recording. It may or may not have been paranormal, but I always considered it as such. And it's strange that I'm hearing things in this house too. G'day mates, it's Busta here. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks again to the Hive members that bravely shared their stories for us all here, and I hope you guys are all doing really well. For the chance to have your story feature in a video, you can send your story to my email, which is in the description below. If you would like more scary stories too, you can click on the card at the top right of your screen or on one of the annotations on your screen right now. As always guys, it would be awesome if you could like, share, comment, and subscribe if you're new. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for updates throughout the week. And also, if you would like content early and completely advert-free for as little as $1 a month, feel free to click on the link to my Patreon account and sign up there for regular MP3 format stories. Thanks again for tuning in and for all the love as always, guys, and I'll see you mates in the next one.